Meet Argentavis magnificens, an extinct form of giant teratorn from our own real world. With over a 20-foot wingspan, Argentavis haunted the skies of Argentina over 10,000 years ago. The species is related to modern-day turkey vultures and condors and would likely have had similar diets and flight patterns. This is only a replica of what the creature looked like when it was alive, but it was built to have the maximum wingspan of a living specimen, 20 feet from wingtip to wingtip. Now, how is this at all relevant to A Song of Ice and Fire? Well, Argentavis magnificens has the same wingspan of Drogon, Daenerys Targaryen's largest dragon and her personal mount. Quote, "Above them all the dragon turned, dark against the sky. His scales were black, his eyes and horns and spinal plates blood red. Ever the largest of her three, in the wild Drogon had grown larger still. His wings stretched 20 feet from tip to tip, black as jet. He flapped them once as he swept above the sands, and the sound was like a clap of thunder." End quote. This passage has always fascinated me. The way Drogon is described, it sounds like he is a much bigger dragon, but the text tells us he only has a 20-foot wingspan, and it seems many readers interpret the text the same way. Drogon is much bigger than described. Because if you look at the picture in the background, that dragon for sure does not have a 20-foot wingspan. Most drawings of Daenerys taming Drogon in Daznak's pit do not show a book-accurate representation of Drogon's size. I mean, this dragon definitely doesn't have a 20-foot wingspan, and it even has the nerve to have 6 limbs? What in the Dark Souls is this? Amazing art though, no tea, no shade. So artists are taking liberties with the text and making Drogon into a much bigger dragon for dramatic effect. The show did that and no one was really complaining, right? Martin has said before he is not great with numbers, but he has also made it clear Drogon is barely large enough to bear Dany's weight. He mentions this quite specifically in an interview. Here's the clip.
Drogon is a very young dragon and still, barely large enough to get Dany into the sky.
Drogon would be a much bigger dragon if Martin kept the 5-year gap between A Storm of Swords and A Feast for Crows. Based on what we know of previous dragons like Moondancer, Drogon is pushing the limits of rideability. Is Martin fudging the numbers to make Dany a dragon rider, or is there something more magical at work here? But for this video, let's forget magic. Let's enter into the realm of realism. For this video, let's use math, biology, and history to talk about dragons. Why? Because science. It's fun. And because this is YouTube and I need a clickbaity title, here are 4 useless facts about dragons. Starting with number 4, Drogon's size. Let's gain a more accurate, realistic size for Drogon based on his wingspan. Thanks to a video from Trey the Explainer, I learned that the wingspan of flying creatures is roughly 3 times the length of their bodies. The longer the body, the bigger the wingspan. The bigger the body, the less likely the creature will be capable of flight. With a wingspan of 20 feet, that means Drogon is approximately 6 feet long. Based on this, we can also calculate Drogon's height as well. Drogon would be about 3 feet tall going off of the previous measurements. So, scientifically accurate Drogon would look a bit like this. This is a girl standing next to Argentavis magnificens. This helps us see what Daenerys would look like next to Drogon if he were scientifically accurate. A bit underwhelming, isn't it? It kind of takes the thunder out of Drogon's wings, knowing he's supposed to be that size.
That doesn't look very scary. More like a 6-foot turkey.
Dany wouldn't need a whip to beat him, more like a rolled up newspaper. Now, you may have guessed from my channel name or channel avatar, I'm a fan of dragons, books about dragons, TV shows about dragons, even games about dragons. Games like Call of Dragons. Set in the realm of Tartarus, Call of Dragons is a strategy game with online role-playing game elements that allows you to freely dive in and explore a fantasy world with unlimited possibilities. Recruit elven warriors, mighty orcs, frost mages, and countless other magical heroes. The story of Call of Dragons is one many fantasy fans will be familiar with. Darkness has come to cloak a once peaceful land. Ancient and powerful beasts have arisen to threaten all that dwell within. No one knows where they came from, where they will strike, or the true extent of their terrifying power. The rival races inhabiting the land must set aside their differences and band together, or be destroyed. Protect your homeland from mighty behemoths. There are 8 types of these unique raid instances to be found. Master each behemoth's pattern of attack and fight back to emerge victorious. When you enter a behemoth's lair, remember, it's a fight to the death. To survive, you'll need to use everyone's abilities to the fullest, and once you beat a behemoth, you get to keep them. Your former foe will join your alliance and fight alongside you, becoming your secret weapon. Catch 'em all. There's no limit to the behemoths your alliance can capture. As a fan of fantasy who loves doing deep dives into history and lore, one feature of the game I personally enjoy is interacting with the heroes that come to populate my village. These heroes have unique names, skills, and attributes that you can modify, and motivating reasons why they have come to fight for you. You can check in with them ever so often to learn more about their backstories, build trust with each social interaction, and win resource rewards the deeper you build your bonds. Be sure to check out their stories in the Heroes Archive as the trust between you deepens and more parts of their histories are revealed. There are neat Easter eggs to be found in the dialogue for those lovers of fantasy out there. Use the resources they gift you and gather your own across vast distances. Use them to build up your village and fortify its defenses. Train your armies to launch massive attacks against the Dark Invaders or rival human opponents. There is crossplay between PC and mobile devices. When I'm not home, I frequently check in on my kingdom via the mobile app. That way, you can keep your territory safe, join in on raids, and send aid to friends who are under attack, no matter where you are. Magic Monsters Mastery. Download Call of Dragons from the link in the description. Every viewer who downloads on PC helps the channel. You know, this picture of Gwenwyn from the game is actually very close to an accurate depiction of Dany and what she's supposed to look like riding Drogon for the first time. But since we're on the subject of dragon riding, let's go to entry number 3. Dragon riding is impossible. If dragons were real, scientifically accurate creatures, riding them would still be a thing of imagination. Achieving flight is very taxing. Creatures in flight are constantly resisting the force of gravity after all, which is why birds have hollow bones. This makes them very lightweight, because the heavier you are, the harder it is to fly. Martin attempts some measure of realism by having dragons be mostly tail and neck with slender bodies. Those long tails would actually hinder their flight, but more on that in a moment. Moondancer, when Baela Targaryen rode her for the first time, was said to be no larger than a warhorse and weighed less. During the 1400s, warhorses were known to weigh between 900 and 1400 pounds, or somewhere between 400 and 600 kilos. Moondancer, without a rider, would still be heavier than the heaviest flying creature known to exist in our real world. The heaviest flying creatures ever to grace the skies belong to the extinct genus of Quetzalcoatlus. The name derives from the Aztec feathered serpent god Quetzalcoatl, itself a type of dragon. The largest type of Quetzalcoatlus had a wingspan of over 30 feet and weighed between 200 and 500 pounds, or somewhere between 90 to 200 kilos. The weight and size are debated among experts of the field, and for a long time, experts wondered if the bigger versions of Quetzalcoatlus could fly at all. Taking to the air requires a lot of energy. The heavier you are, the harder it is. Look at what spaceships have to do to achieve liftoff. It was hard to understand how a specimen such as Quetzalcoatlus could ever get off the ground. They were as tall as giraffes, and just look at those big old heads. Did it take long running starts like a plane before takeoff? Or did it drop from great heights to soar on thermal winds? There is a strong belief that it was capable of launching itself off the ground and into the air. Take, for example, the flight of vampire bats. The quad launch cycle of vampire bats demonstrates how such a flying creature could make its way into the air. Now imagine the creature the size of a small plane doing the same. Speaking of planes, I never thought this scene from the show made sense. You know, the one where Dany suddenly appears out of a cloudy sky and attacks the Lannisters. I figured you would be able to see her from way off. There's no way she could hide. Then I saw this. Anyway, it is theorized that Quetzalcoatlus had just the right amount of mass and strength to perform such a feat, the quad launch. Notice though, the species does have a large head and long neck, but it does not have an overly long tail like dragons tend to do. That's because tails add weight and they produce drag, making it much harder for animals to fly. Peacocks are also capable of flight, but not for long distances. Look how their heavy tails seem to weigh them down. A long tail, heavy scales, a big body, and a rider plus saddle means dragons wouldn't be getting anywhere off the ground, if they were real. And if Quetzalcoatlus was alive today, it is highly unlikely it would be able to bear the weight of a human rider. But since Quetzalcoatlus is dead as hell and dragons aren't real, those dreams of dragon riding are just going to have to stay dragon dreams. So if dragons can't have human riders, what else can't they do? Breastfeed. Number 2 on our list, dragons shouldn't know how to nurse. This has been an odd obsession of mine for a while. I talked about it on Reddit. I've made a TikTok about it. Dragons should not know how to breastfeed. Full stop. Period. In the last chapter of A Game of Thrones, Daenerys Targaryen emerges from a great big fire holding 3 living dragons, the only 3 dragons known in the world. 2 of the dragons are nursing from her, which should totally be impossible considering dragon anatomy. Let me explain Pepe Sylvia style. Look at the mouths of these baby crocodiles. They have narrow reptilian snouts because they are reptiles. Now look at the mouth of an infant. You see the difference? The mouths of reptiles are not designed for nursing. They have no lips or cheeks. They don't have the ability to latch onto a nipple. Humans can, in infancy and beyond. And that's why humans are called mammals. It comes from us having mammary glands. And that's what's strange about Dany's dragon's nursing. Humans are born with the instinct to nurse. It's not something we have to be taught to do. For Dany's dragons to be born knowing how to nurse means it's an instinct for them as well. It means dragons do nurse. So do the dragons in this world have mammary glands? Do they have nipples? No. The reason Dany's dragons are nursing is because Martin wanted to drive home the idea that she is the mother of dragons. Also, Martin has a weird fixation on nipples. Nipples in this series are always being pinched, pulled, bitten, chewed on, or chopped off. It's a thing he really likes to do. So no, you cannot milk Balerion the Black Dread.
I have nipples, Greg. Could you milk me?
But if you could, that milk would probably be really delicious. No, wait, hear me out. It would come out pasteurized for one, great for hot chocolate. Dragon milk would be like a Legend of Zelda food ingredient or something. This got really weird. But you know what? I don't care. I would eat a dragon. Yup, I would eat one of Dany's dragons. Try to stop me. Put it in front of me. I would eat it. Alright, so I know some of you will say maybe they try to nurse because dragons and Valerians share blood and so dragons might have some human instinct. While it may be true dragons and Valerians share blood, dragons can't physically nurse is the point I'm trying to make here. On the topic of baby dragons, we know they eventually start eating solid food. Dany has to cook chunks of meat for them to eat because they cannot burn the food themselves. Only humans and dragons eat cooked meat. But if baby dragons in this series aren't born with the ability to feed themselves, they can't do Dracarys, then that must mean, number one, dragons in this series are raised by their parents. There was a huge debate by scientists over whether or not dinosaurs raised their young. At least that's what Jurassic Park 2 said, and that was a documentary, right? Like Highlander? If baby dragons can't Dracarys their own meat for consumption, then that must mean for a period of their early development, their parents must provide charred meat for them. Dragon parents care for their young. This has to be the case, or otherwise, who is feeding all the baby dragons? An adult dragon, one that can breathe fire, must be hauling food back to the nest for them to feed on. An alternative is that perhaps infant dragons are scavengers, but that would mean their survival would depend on adult dragons feeding close to their hatching area, or them following around adults, and we get no indication of this. So you have to wonder, is it just the one who lays the eggs that cares for the young, or both parents? We are not told much about dragon breeding, or how young dragons are raised. We are told when dragons like Syrax and Dreamfire lay clutches of eggs, but we are not told how or if they tend to them. This one small detail gives us so much to speculate on. Or is this one of those things that Martin included but didn't want us thinking too much on? If so,
Too late! Ready or not, here he comes.
But that's going to do it for this video on Dragon Facts. I have some other facts I have in mind, but I think I will develop those into other projects. For example, dragons in this series remind me a lot of orcas from our real world, highly intelligent creatures that aren't interested much in humanity, but have been enslaved for selfish purposes. Until then, thank you all for watching. I hope you all enjoyed. If you did, please like, subscribe, and comment down below. Don't forget to ring that bell to turn on notifications. Thank you to the following Patreon supporters and channel members. You can become one for as little as $1 a month. Again, thank you all for watching, and I will see you all for the next one. But before I go, I'll leave you with this thought. If dragons could be milked, if they had dragon milk, do you think it would come in different colors depending on the dragon, like their fire? This is a serious question.